the lovely and talented Dennis Paoli.
Yay.
Big production value.
Yeah, we have unlimited budget here, folks, during COVID-19.
You don't spend it, but you have it.
Yeah, well, we have it, exactly. Well, it goes into posters behind me.
That's great. Is this going to be video too? Well, is this a video podcast? Is this a video? Is it a vodcast? I mean,
it's like I guess it's like a vidcast or.
Okay.
Yeah. It's whatever the kids call
Dennis, it's a bad trip. You remember those.
Yeah, I had a few.
Certain visions.
I had a few.
Do you know this band?
No.
Okay. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I had one time where I was tripping and we were watching television. We were watching something on television. And the image started to roll. Remember the old TV where the image would roll when you had just had the antenna, the rabbit ears antenna, and the image. And if you didn't get the image, if you didn't get the signal properly, the image would roll on the TV, and it was very disorienting and to the point of being nauseating. And I was complaining bitterly, and I was moving the antenna around. And other people were saying, Dennis, what are you doing? Stop. Because the image actually wasn't rolling. It was just rolling in my mind. And I couldn't stop it from rolling. So yes, that was not the best. That was not the best trip.
Yeah. In college, I knew people who had a pyramid of old televisions with magnets that would go in front of the television and purposely warp the image.
They
could distort the picture with a magnet. Yeah.
And that was back with cathode ray tubes, and the magnetic, beam of electrons. You can't do that.
Yeah, you engineering types had so much fun.
We did.
You could warp reality just enough to add a little soupçon to the psychedelic, drug-induced.
But isn't Bill Gates going to make us all zombies with 5G?
Are the Brits still seriously paranoid about that? It was the British were very.
They were.
There's a lot of conspiracies about that. Yeah.
Yeah,
the funny thing is, it doesn't work that well. The 5G doesn't broadcast that far. You got to be fairly close to it.
That BT tower they had. The British telephony tower they had in the center of London. That was like a secret, under their State Secrets Act, that they couldn't mention it in documents. Yet it's there in the public. It had a restaurant
right there.
And finally they said, "This is silly. Let's."
Like the Space Needle. In Seattle, I mean, it's a landmark.
It's a total landmark.
We used to find our, to get to our favorite Italian restaurant in London, it was like, just go toward the tower.
Yeah.
And
Now, Dennis, speaking of Italian, I always thought your name was Italian, but it's not, right?
It is.
Paoli, because I asked Stuart and he said it wasn't.
Well, Stuart was pulling your leg.
It was like Hungarian or something.
Stuart was pulling your leg.
You mean he would do that sort of thing?
He was essentially disparaging my background.
Okay.
No, I'm Italian. No, it's very Italian.
Yeah,
it sounds very Italian. Yeah.
Actually, okay, I take it back. Paoli is not Italian. It's Corsican. And Corsican is French. Paoli is, it's on the island of Corsica, it's the equivalent of Johnson. Yeah. About, 15% of the people on the island are named Paoli. The great General Paoli, who was the liberator of Corsica and was one of the inspirations for Napoleon. Was the mentor of Napoleon until Napoleon put him in jail. Until he put Napoleon in jail, and Napoleon put him in jail.
Yeah, because Napoleon pronounced his name Bonaparte, right?
Yeah.
So you're related.
So it's it's a common Corsican name. Indeed, my grandfather's my great-grandfather and was Italian, but his wife was French. And let me see. I don't know if you can see this, but
I don't know. There you go.
That's,
oh that's a great picture. Yeah.
That's my grandfather, great-grandfather, and great-grandmother.
Wow.
He was Italian and she was French. And so if that's what Stuart told you, that I'm actually not Italian.
I asked him and he
my
said,
last name is Italian. You know,
well,
Migliore, right?
Migliore.
Yeah,
you know,
it's all over it.
I thought it was a pasta.
I saw that too. Yeah, Migliore pasta.
Well, it's the best, right? And so that there is brands around the world called
Streisig, and Streisig is a strudel.
the best strudel.
Yeah, you know, you can get a good Streisig on the east side. I love going to Italy. And my wife is a churchgoer. She's a practicing Episcopalian, and she loves churches. So we'll be walking down the street having a conversation, and she's smaller than I am. So we'll be having a conversation, and I'll suddenly look over and she won't be there. And I will just backtrack to the last church we passed, go inside, and there she'll be there. Yeah. And in Italy, when you do that, the art in those churches is spectacular. It's usually spectacular in some way or another, and it's usually incredibly Gothic.
Yeah,
it's and
the icons and all that. Yeah.
You know, well, the paintings on the wall.
Paintings,
you know, I mean, it was like, okay, here's the torture we put our saints through. Here's here's hell over here on this wall. This is hell. These are going to be people, and these are going to be, the demons dragging you down to hell, and this is how they'll do it. And these are the tortures that you'll suffer in hell. Over here on this wall are the deprivations of the saints and how awful their lives were, and now give us some money.
Yeah,
it's funny you should mention that. There's one movie I like to talk about is
The Pit and the Pendulum,
which has all that stuff in it, which is probably one of my favorite movies you guys did, but we'll talk about that. When you were in Rome, did you go to the Capuchin cemetery with all the skulls?
No, I did not. I have not been.
You got to see that, man.
I understand that. It's just, and I've been to Rome a number of times.
Go, please go. Yeah.
And I haven't been to Cinecittà. There's a number of places, so I have to go back. Yeah. Whenever we can go back.
We're gonna have to wait.
But no, I haven't been to some of the most famous places. But the fact is, you can go in, as I was saying, you can go into almost any church, small, medium, or large, and see something that's spectacular and spectacularly gruesome.
Well, they've been there for a long time, so there's history everywhere you walk.
Incredibly.
Well, I was really, looking forward to seeing the Bellini, the Saint Teresa.
Yeah.
And I went to the church, and it was closed for lunch.
Oh no, it's a wonderful. It's funny. We went into that church, and there was nobody there.
Yeah.
There was nobody there, and that is an incredible piece of work.
It's a surreal masterpiece.
Because Saint Teresa herself was, the fact of she was a visionary. I
just happen to have a picture of it right here.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's terrifying. It's terrifying. It's lovely on the one hand and terrifying on the other.
But you don't see it.
I do think that the Roman Catholic Church,
RKC,
like on a stage, really brought me into the realm of horror because of these things. And when I was a kid growing up in various Chicago and other places with Italian neighborhoods, the whole concept as a kid, I took a lot of this very literally. So this is the body of Christ, and so my little brain would go, do they have part of Christ chopped up and distributed amongst all
because they said it was. It wasn't an analog. It was the body of Christ.
Well,
it was the blood.
Transubstantiation.
Transubstantiation. Yeah, you got it.
Transubstantiation, which is one of the maddest ideas in the history of ideas. But it is fundamental. It is foundational.
Yes.
For Christianity, for the Christian church, it is really a frightening idea.
And when you're a kid,
your blood and your body, that your substance can be transubstantiated into, food.
Yes, exactly.
Ingestible food. It's
but
not Soylent Green exactly, but it's not far from that.
And
it goes back to the Dionysus, and the worship the wine. He was the wine god. So when you were drinking the wine, you were putting the god inside yourself.
Yeah. The myth of Dionysus. The myth of Dionysus, and for the record, the name Dennis is derived from Dionysus. The myth of Dionysus is that his acolytes eat him.
Yes.
He is. He's the god of wine, and then he's dinner. All of those.
The Maenads would rip men apart and eat them. His followers.
Right.
Because they would get crazy.
It's all this derivation of all these stories that gone over time and led into these narratives, depending on.
It's cannibalism, basically. It's finding a way, which is what we do in the world of horror. It's finding a way to violate and transgress the taboos. So you address the society's most fundamental taboos to begin with, and then you transgress the taboos themselves are transgressive, and then your job as a maker of horror is to transgress the taboo, is to make it not only make it real, but go beyond it. And it's so much fun.
Well, let's talk about your background a little bit, Dennis. Back in Chicago, because were you born in Chicago? You're originally from there? Okay. So you met Stuart Gordon at Lane Tech, I think?
Yeah, in high school. I met Stuart in high school. We went to a technical high school. It was...
But Lane Tech is huge, isn't it? Like 2,000 students?
It was 3,500 at the time. And at the time, it was all male. It was a public school, but it was a college prep school. You had to test into it. But it was a tech school. You had to take 2 years of mechanical drawing. You had to take 2 years of shop. Plus it was a science school. I took essentially 5 years of math and 5 years of science, 2 years of physics. I was a science and math nerd.
Wow.
Stuart, but it was also a serious art school. And it had a serious art. Stuart was in the art class, and they used to publish their own daily newspaper. The school published had its own print shop.
Wow.
Published its own daily newspaper, published a semesterly humor magazine. Before I met Stuart, I read his work in the humor magazine and knew I would like it. It was a really great place, and there were no chicks to have to impress, so we could be totally crazy.
That sounds like Catholic school.
we could, well, it's to some we could be totally crazy.
Yeah.
And it allowed you to learn as much as you could. At the same time, you were extending your personality as much as you could.
So how do you go from? So Dennis, how do you go from that technical side of things that, you know, you're talking about math and physics and drawing, to getting into Gothic literature and, you know, in Irish literature specifically, right? I mean, like, did you do a right turn somewhere?
Yeah, well, that was in college. I started college as a math major. I always liked reading, and essentially one of the, again, besides humor, one of the things that connected Stuart and I when we met was that we liked sci-fi and horror.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the beginning of a golden age of sci-fi and horror. It was the era of American International and Hammer films.
So what year are we talking about specifically right now?
Early to mid 60s.
Early mid 60s. Okay.
And
perfect,
you know, the you know, some of those films started in the late 50s, but we're talking early 62 to 65, something like that. And Stuart and I would go to double features. You would go to a double feature and you would see a Vincent Price gem, followed by Christopher Lee, you know, and it was like, wow, you know, what's not to like?
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know, so there was that science fiction crossover between tech and storytelling. But when I did, we both ended up going to the University of Wisconsin, where we were roommates. And again, Stuart was into art. He wanted to go into film, but the film courses were full. The story is the film courses were full. There was also a course you had to take, and the professor in film to major in it, and everybody hated that professor. So, you know, that. So Stuart went into theater. I started out in math. I was a math major, and I loved it. I really loved, you know, you got into, you know, calculus, and, you know, calculus describing movement in 3 dimensions. And it was really cool, except that what I discovered was that problems that took me, I could do all the problems. I could do all the math. But problems that were taking me 25 minutes and 3 sheets of paper, other guys were doing in their heads in 30 seconds.
Right.
Yeah.
So, they're mathematicians. I'm just this guy who likes math.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I decided, you know, maybe I should look around for something where I'm as good at that as they are at the real math.
Right.
And I never found anything, but I found that, you know, in literature, you could fake it really easily. So I studied literature.
Yeah.
And I had always,
that's where all the babes were anyway. Right? So.
I had always liked literature. Actually, at the time, back in the hippie days, that's true.
But was your first reading more of pulpy stuff as opposed to?
Oh yeah, no, it was sci-fi. It was almost all sci-fi.
It's all sci-fi, yeah. So that makes sense.
It was almost, you know, my own read besides what you read for school English class. Yeah. Yes, it was, you know, it was genuinely all. It was
Isaac Asimov and
but to follow.
Yeah, Asimov and Heinlein. You know, yeah, Heinlein. You know,
Larry Niven maybe. Clark.
Yeah, you know, gosh, I should go track him down if I can find him. You know, the names escape me now. There was the.
Were you reading Lovecraft though, or no?
Yeah, we read Lovecraft.
You were reading.
Stuart and I both read Lovecraft.
Right.
Yeah, sort of independently. I didn't read a lot of Lovecraft. Poe, of course. I didn't read a lot of Lovecraft, but it wasn't hard to find.
Yeah.
You know, it was.
I'm sorry, Dennis. Was it more like just, you know, being exposed to it through anthologies? You find like a story here or there by Lovecraft, or did you actually?
No, it was just, you know, you would get a book. You would pick up a book of short stories by H.G. Ballard. You'd pick up a book of short stories by, who wrote 2001?
Arthur C. Clarke.
Arthur C. Clarke, and then you pick up a bunch of stories, you know, and a book of stories by H.P. Lovecraft. You know, I mean, it was just like you pick, you know, and you read through them, and then you look for, you know, and it was sort of like you rolled through these guys. You know, it was like, you know, you didn't, oh, this guy's great, I'm going to read everything he wrote. You know, you just rolled through, you know, whoever was new, you know.
But was it like you and Stuart going like, hey man, did you read this? You should look at this, that kind of thing? Or was it just independent?
Yeah, a little bit. We were more into movies. We were more into sharing movies. You know, we were both, I mean, and it wasn't just horror and sci-fi. You know, Stuart liked Westerns. Stuart loved Western movies. And so did I, but you know, I usually didn't go to them, you know, and almost all movies were good. I mean, Hitchcock, anything Hitchcock put out was unmissable. You had to see the Hitchcock as soon as you could. So, you know, that was the, you know, and those Stanley Donen thrillers, Charade and Arabesque and those kinds of things, those kinds of movies, the thrillers that we you know.
And were you watching like Outer Limits and Twilight Zone?
Yeah. Oh, you know, Twilight Zone for sure.
Sure.
Outer Limits. Yeah.
But then
we're taking over your TV screen.
Yeah. Nice.
Well, go ahead, please do. You know? How about no commercials? How would that work? You know, is that okay? If you're really taking over, take the fuck over.
Yeah. But so was there any, you know, so you switched from math to literature type of focus. You know, you were roommates with Stuart. How did you know, your first projects with Stuart and
if you could talk about your comedy group too, and you made movies.
Oh yeah, in high school we had a comedy group, we had a satire group. Our heroes, actually, our live theater heroes. It was Chicago, so there wasn't a lot of live theater when we were kids growing up.
Really? Wow, because Chicago was.
No, Chicago was a meat and potato, you know, a red sauce and meat town. It wasn't a big restaurant town like it is now. And it wasn't a big theater town. It was movies. You went to the, you know, everybody went to the movies on the weekend. There were these big old wonderful movie houses. But there wasn't really a lot of theater the way there is now. And well, not right now because of the pandemic, but you know, the Chicago, you know, especially the north side, but it's true of much of the a hunk of the south side as well, is that every neighborhood had a storefront theater in Chicago. It's amazing, and they do original work. They do good and original work. There's a ton of talent in Chicago, but that wasn't always the case. And when we were growing up, the only live theater that we were attracted to at all, there were either road shows of the big Broadway things, which were too expensive to go to and who really cared. And then there was comedy. There was comedy and satire. There was Second City, and Compass. There were the local comedy clubs. And Second City were our heroes. You know, I remember going to see Alan Arkin on stage, you know, doing bits, doing sketch comedy. So we love sketch comedy. And as I said, Stuart wrote for the humor magazine, and I and a number of friends were writing little humor bits for ourselves to entertain ourselves. So Stuart and I started writing some bits, and Stuart put together a group. There were 4 of us, 3 guys and a woman. And we were very influenced by the Second City sketch humor. Not just Second City, though. It was also the other great Chicago satire talent was Nichols and May. And they came out of the South Side. They were University of Chicago. And they were here. They were heroes too. And the other one, of course, was Lenny Bruce. We love Lenny Bruce.
Oh yeah.
Were they the Compass players, or was that?
No, Compass. Wasn't Compass San Francisco?
I thought Second City kind of came out of that, or I thought,
not that I know. The other thing, the other group was Story Theater, Paul Sills Story Theater.
Oh, Paul Sills, of course.
Yeah, was you know. So there was some really fundamentally, profoundly good live theater in Chicago. It was just mostly sketch comedy and live storytelling. So we sort of followed in those traditions, and we were pretty good. We had we humbly called ourselves the Human Race, and we did the coffee. We actually got hired after a couple of disasters. We actually got hired at on the coffee house circuit in Chicago. It was also the time of folk music. I mean, the people who came out of Chicago folk music, Steve Goodman, John Prine, you know, Josh White Jr. These were also heroes, except we couldn't play guitar and sing. So we played clubs that those guys played. And we would be sort of the palate cleanser. There would be, you know, some first act of, you know, just a local, you know, a newcomer, a local newcomer, or you know, a duo. And then we would come on, do 20 minutes, a half an hour of comedy, and then the headliner would come on for a 40 minutes.
It was like 16, 18-year-old, like you and Stuart out of high school?
Yeah, we were 16, 17 years old.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it was paid. They were paid gigs. We didn't get paid a lot, but they were paid gigs. We were good enough that we had a following. You know, people followed us from place to place. And then we got a regular gig at a place.
Well, that was the FBI, wasn't it? You mentioned.
There might have been. Eventually, it was. Eventually, we got a regular gig at a place called It's Here, which is very cleverly named It's Here. And it was one of those places where the tables were only 3 feet off the floor. People sat on pillows on the floor. You know, yeah, you click. And we actually had fans who came to. We played some other places too. And once we got to college, we brought the group to college with us. With a one cast change, we changed the woman who was in the group went away to another college, and actually got married. So we substituted another person.
What was one of your sketches like? Do you remember any of them? Like, were they very topical or just like?
They were. Yeah, we had a Vietnam. You know, we had a Vietnam skit. You know, Laugh Riot, Vietnam.
Yeah, I was going to say. Wow.
Yeah, you know, we had a couple of political skits. We had, you know, yeah, you made fun of Barry Goldwater, if you remember him. We had some profound bits, you know, robots who, you know, there was one where we parodied, there were a lot of parodies.
Oh, okay.
We parodied a driver education film. Remember driver education films?
Red Asphalt.
And we did, instead of films, it was slides. So we did a slideshow, and Stuart was the voice of, you know, it was Otto's Otto. And, you know, Stuart did the voice of, hello, Otto, and I was Otto. It was just me in a chair on stage alone. It was just blackouts, you know, and, you know, Otto makes a left turn, you know, and I would make a left turn signal.
Oh my God.
You know, and it's like, you know, be careful, Otto. It's, you know, it's a red light, you know, and then it'd be, look out, Otto. You know, the light would go out and it would come on and I'd be upside down in the chair, you know, and we did.
This is weird, Dennis. This is weird because I did the exact same thing. That it actually was in 8th grade where we had
yeah, it's very 8th grade. We were very 8th grade.
we did. I was a drunk driver, and then I go to see, you know, I go to heaven, and it's a Mexican who's on a Mickey Mouse phone, telling me, you know, whatever. And we did these jokes like, St. James, and then the next door said St. John, and we opened it, and it was the bathroom, and that kind of humor. But
Right.
it got shown around the whole Dallas, school system as a anti-drunk driving film for kids.
Excellent.
I thought it was it's like an anti-humor film, maybe.
We did another bit where I was a gay umpire.
How did that go?
I would be leaning over the catcher, and Stuart was the catcher. I would go, "Is that English leather you're wearing?
That's funny.
It smells divine." So yeah. Well, we were funny.
Yeah.
So we and then when Stuart started doing theater in Madison at the university, I acted. I became one of his actors.
Were you part of the infamous Peter Pan thing?
Yeah, I was in Peter Pan. I was two of the Lost Boys. They're the twins in the Lost Boys.
Mm-hmm.
I was the twins. The trope was, of course, this was after the Democratic Convention in Chicago, which both Stuart and I went to the protests for, and were roundly gassed and chased by the cops and the National Guard. Actually, we were happy when the National Guard came because they stood between us and the cops.
It was a police riot. I mean,
yes,
it was proven.
Yes. So the idea is we did Peter Pan, and we cut a few lines, but we did all the dialogue straight. But Peter and the Lost Boys were hippies. The Darling family, the Darling Wendy, Peter, and Michael were suburban kids. Peter turns them on, and flying is tripping. Tinkerbell is Peter's gay friend. The pirates were the Chicago police, and the Indians were the Black Panthers.
Wow.
And it played perfectly.
Yeah.
It played. So I was among the Lost Boys. There were twins, little twins, and I played a hippie who had taken so much acid he had skitzed out. So I was the twins. We were busted. We were the university shut us down first. So then we did a couple of guerrilla performances. We took over a room in the a lecture hall in the university, and did it on the stage of a lecture hall. We did a couple of performances, and the recent Tony winner Andre DeShields was in it. He was terrific. And Stuart's wife Carolyn was in it. They weren't married at the time. Why we were actually busted is that the flying scene, when Peter puts the acid on Wendy's tongue, and then has her drink some water, he throws right after that. He throws the water over onto the rest of the water that's in the cup, right, onto the audience as this light show comes up. So all of a sudden you see these droplets of light flying into the audience, and then they feel it.
Right.
Just as the first notes of In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, dun, 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 come on. And for the entirety of In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, which goes on for about 5.5 minutes, there's a nude dancing. Right. Which is flying. That
was a trip, right? Yeah. You were projecting light on the women.
And we were busted. We were busted primarily for that, but they weren't really happy that we were portraying the pirates as the Chicago police. Right. And there's a scene where the pirates and the Indians fight. So it's essentially the Chicago police fighting with the Black Panthers. This is, before they, essentially assassinated Fred Hampton. Mm-hmm. So it was pretty provocative. So the university shut us down. And then when we did these renegade performances, yes, there were, this was when there were plants in the audience from the local police department.
Yeah.
Right. And they filed complaints, and then they arrested Stuart and Carolyn They were the only ones they could find. They arrested Stuart and Carol. The rest of us ran like hell. But they arrested Stuart and Carolyn, you know, they almost went to trial. They eventually, it took them months to drop charges.
Well,
months.
Wasn't the prosecutor found guilty of something later on that was pretty nefarious?
I think it was. No, it wasn't the prosecutor. It was one of the complainants.
Oh, okay.
Was a child molester.
Child molester, yeah, that's what
yeah. So anyway, that's what our theater was about. And then Stuart left school and started the theater in Chicago. And he was one of and following in Paul Sills' footsteps, they did story theater. First thing they did was Animal Farm. So Stuart was always political. I mean, if you look, you were holding up Pit and the Pendulum before. That's one of our most political movies.
Yeah, I want to talk about that some more. But
you know, that's set in 1492.
Did you guys kind of? I'm sorry, but did you guys kind of diverge after Madison, or were you involved with the theater in Chicago right away, or how?
No, I was not. I was pretty much my intent was pretty much to be an academic, to continue studying to get a PhD. So I had become fascinated with James Joyce and Irish literature. There was a great teacher at Wisconsin of Irish lit, and it's great. It's great stuff, you know.
First it's warm and then it's wet. Wait.
Yeah, it's cold and wet.
Okay.
I got a chance to go to Ireland and get a master's in Ireland. So when Stuart was starting the theater in Chicago, he got married, and then I got married the year after that. And my wife and I went to Dublin, for a year, in which we traveled all over Europe. And the idea was, when we came back to New York, if we could find jobs in New York, we would stay in New York because we had a lot of friends, and I was at Columbia University at the time. But if we could not find jobs in New York and couldn't make a life for ourselves, we would go back to Chicago and work in the theater. I would work in Stuart's theater. I would act and write, and Heidi, who was my wife at the time, would be the business manager of the theater because she was good at that. And she found a job and in loose leaf legal services, in legal writing. And she went on to become an expert, a world expert in something called, it was called language simplification at the time. It was, you had to, in the 70s, and it's still the case, but in the 70s, the movement was to take corporate and consumer communications and employer-employee communications and simplify them so that they were readable, so they weren't just legal gobbledygook. She was an expert at that. She was brilliant. And I got back into Columbia University, and I got a job teaching at Hunter College, which I had which I just retired from after 48 years. So we stayed in New York, but we were in constant connection with Stuart. And then I reconnected with the theater when essentially, because I knew baseball, because Stuart knew I knew baseball. I was a great baseball. I was a big Cubs fan. And they were doing Bleacher Bums. They were creating Bleacher Bums, which is about, a day in the life of a game in the life of some Chicago Cubs fans. So I came in, and they already were working. They had worked out most of the play from improvs, because they were still an improv theater. They were still to great extent, although they were one of the great narrative theaters of all time. I think they could really tell a story. And won a lot of talent. Dennis Franz and Joe Mantegna, and the list was spectacular actors. But I came in to play doctor to help put it together, because it was really, it was a really complex puzzle, because you were at a game and you had to have all of the outs and all of the plays and all this. So, so I came into, Stuart knew I knew baseball, so I came in to play doctor. And after that, we started working together again.
Was that some of that based on your personal experience at all? Like the, you know, the betting and the experiences in the stands at all?
Yeah, you know, I wasn't one of the bettors. I wouldn't bet money on it, but you knew who they were. You know, I would always sit in the bleachers, my friends and I, you know, until it was so bad for my skin, I couldn't handle it anymore. We would always sit in the bleachers, and you know, you knew who the guys were. You know, I mean, you know, it was these were real people that they based it on. So this
and the honeymooners. Was it there? It felt like there was a little tribute to the honeymooners. Yeah, you know.
No, these are just who those people are. You know, the honeymooner. You know, these were just. This is working class. This is, you know, working in lower middle class Chicago, and you know, that's essentially who Ralph Cramden and Norton were.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it was the same ilk. They were cut from the same cloth.
But Bleacher Bums is sort of like an evergreen. Isn't that play always being performed? I mean, because it's so simple.
I think, you know, I think 2 years ago was the first time we didn't make any money from Sam French.
Wow. All
that play was done in 1978. It was the longest running play in the history of LA. It ran for 7.5 years.
Wow.
It was remounted 4 times in Chicago successfully. It's been done all over the place. I've consulted, you know, they made a middling movie out of it, but they did some things pretty well that I worked on, that I contributed to. So yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a hardy perennial, you know. And then when the Cubs got good and actually won the World Series, it came back and it was done some more. Yeah.
When I was a kid in Chicago, we see the Cubs with all the Italians. All the Italians would go in this big group, and I was like the youngest at the time. It was like 72, I think, or 74, or something in that time frame. And
they were still good at 72.
Yeah.
Yeah, they still had Santo and Pizza Man. They had Pizza Man in third. You know, I think Ernie was still playing. First. Yeah.
Banks. Big experience.
Fergie on the mound. Yeah. Golden days.
Golden days.
They were still losers, but it was golden days.
Yeah. Well, you know, Stuart and I.
John, I was going to finish. I was going to say the one thing that I think captures and that you know, like the play too, is like the people, the working class people. I got pushed down catching a pop fly.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I got pushed by. I pushed down, and I was about to catch a pop fly as a kid. And the guy grabbed it and said, "Look, kid, you'll have your day. I'm 40 years old."
Right. That's right.
Like, whatever.
This is the Italian section, huh?
No, that was everybody.
I know.
That was everybody.
I mean, look at the shit they gave Bartman. You know, I mean, you know, I mean, it was, you know, yeah, it was.
It's amazing. Anyway,
I mean, you know, you know. Just sidebar for 2 seconds. You know, they talk about Cub fans now as being the yuppies. They're a yuppie brand now. But the fact is, there's still, you know, it's still, you know, it's still a hot dog and a pizza town. You know, to some degree, that's still there.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I still have the hot dog stands I go to whenever I go back to the city. They're getting harder to find, but there's still a few that I will not go to Chicago without having a Chicago dog. Right. I will not go to Chicago without having deep dish pizza. I will not go, you know, if I can't do that stuff.
Part of your experience.
Okay, what was your favorite pizza place there?
Oh, Uno's. We would always go to
Uno's. Yeah. Okay.
Stuart and I would just drive to Uno's. You know, we would drive down from Wisconsin. A bunch of my friends would drive down from Wisconsin.
Yeah.
We were arrested one time. They stopped us on the way. The car was full of marijuana smoke, and the cops stopped us. And we were, you know, we're not speeding. You're officer. Open the windows. You know, Officer, I don't think we were speeding. No, you weren't speeding. You were going 15 miles an
hour. Going too slow.
It was
going 100.
But we would go, so they arrested the guy, and they arrested the driver. I drove into the city. We got a pizza, and then we bailed him out.
Of course, you got priorities.
Yeah, do it in the right order. That's correct.
I'm answering a text.
Okay.
Go ahead. Let's go.
Okay. So anyway, so that was your first experience with filmmaking in a way too, right? The Bleacher Bum script.
No,
because that was in
78-ish. What?
No, the Bleacher Bum. Oh, the Bleacher Bum's film script wasn't until I don't even know when.
It says Bleacher Bum's TV movie 1979.
Oh, TV movie, yeah, the one that was for PBS.
I got papers on you.
That PBS, yeah, that was for PBS. They videoed it. They did a videotape, right. Which won an Emmy. Won a local Emmy.
Oh wow!
They did a pretty good job. Very difficult to do without an audience. Because the audience is critical to that play, the feedback. But it was I guess that you could say that was the first film I worked on, but I really didn't think of it as a film. They were just trying.
Yeah, they were just doing the play.
The fact is that besides doing sketch comedy, we also made some silly little humor films. Sort of like, remember Kentucky Fried Movie? Those guys, those Lookers. They were from Madison too, and we did little films like that. Like
Super 8 or 16 millimeter, that kind of thing.
Oh wait, where's the photograph?
Hey John, we should have had whistles. We could whistle.
Yeah, I have a wonderful photograph of Stuart and I. Can you wait a minute?
Sure.
Fool's errand, I can't find it.
That's okay. We can always cut it in later, Dennis.
Yeah.
If you find it, we could cut it in.
Okay, don't worry about it. But yes, we would. Yeah, they were Super 8. They were 8 millimeter and Super 8.
Yep.
I think we made 116 mil. They were, just sort of humor pieces. 60s.
What years would this be, Dennis?
60s. Mid to late 60s. 65 to 68, 65 to 67, 68. So, but when the first movie I actually worked on was I had written a script with a friend here in New York who had written Greg Martinelli, who had written an award-winning short film. And he wanted to write a feature, and I had an idea, and we were trying to take Hitchcock's I Confess a step further by a priest hears the confession of a murderer and then becomes the detective and has to try to track down the murderer before the serial killer before he kills again. And that was turned into that was optioned 4 times. We rewrote. It was it made us a little bit of money back in the day when you made money on options, when the people paid for options more than $1. But it was we rewrote it. It was written as a feature. We rewrote it as a 7-act television film. It was rewritten then as rewritten again as a feature, and then rewritten as a 5-act television film, and was eventually filmed. It was eventually produced, shot, and shown on USA cable TV on USA with Christopher Reeve. It was called Mortal Sins.
Okay.
I had written a film. I'd co-written a film with somebody. Stuart knew that. Stuart knew I knew Lovecraft. Stuart knew I knew that I loved horror. So when he was working, and he had originally talked to me about the idea of doing a TV series. And, you know, the original idea for the Lovecraft was, you know, a half-hour anthology, or a half, you know, and then it was going to be an hour anthology. And there was already this half-hour script that he and Bill Norris worked on. And then I came in and expanded that into a half an hour and then into a feature length.
Right.
So they, you know, I sort of fit because one, I had worked with, I've been writing with Stuart for decades by that time. Two, Stuart knew I knew horror and that we liked the same kind of, and we had very close to the same kind of sensibility about it. And he knew I could write movies because I had written one that was, it hadn't been actually shot yet. That was, you know, was optioned 4 different times. I think it took 13 years for that to be made. You know, Dagon took 13 years, something like 13
A drop in the bucket for movies.
You know, a lot of my films have taken, you know, a long time to get produced. But they eventually, you know, a lot of them eventually, I can't believe how many credits I have.
Yeah,
you have a fantastic resume. Yeah.
Like From Beyond, was that like a fast follow-on compared to other films? Like
right after Re-Animator, once Re-Animator came out and it was a relative hit, it didn't make a lot of money, but it made a lot of noise and made a lot of friends. We made a lot of friends.
And use a lot of blood.
You know, the next thing Charlie Band said, you know, okay, do the same thing, you know, only not as much blood and don't make it funny, you know. And it was like, wait a minute, that's what we did.
Charlie Band, you know, because I often wondered that why
it was, like, you know, there was no blood, there was a lot of goo instead. You know, From Beyond, there's a lot of goo. The monsters, you know, the other dimension is full of these, you know, gooey, creepy things. And
sea monkeys, like
and the humor is weirder. It's like weird humor, you know. It's, you know, to me, it's funny when Carolyn, playing the doctor, finds Jeffrey eating a brain. Jeffrey's, you know, his pineal is out.
Yes,
make you very
eating a brain, and she says, and she's the tough doctor. She's been the tough doctor as well. And she goes, oh, Crawford, don't eat those. They're not good for you.
No, I just watch it. It'll make you very sick. Yeah,
you know, that to me, that's funny.
It is.
So, you know, it's
but they're delicious.
But Dennis, can I rag on you just a little bit because I'm a big admirer, so please don't. Yeah. Because, you know, I often wondered, and you answered the question kind of, because Re-Animator wasn't supposed to really be funny when you were first conceiving it, right? That's something that kind of grew. You know, when
please.
No?
Oh, please.
From the minute you guys started writing the TV series.
It's who we are. It was, if you knew Stuart's theater, the idea was you were always on some line or other. There was always some explicit tension, not implicit, but some explicit tension, some explicit dramatic tension you were dealing with. And it was usually humor related. And the humor would, and at any moment, that humor could turn serious, or this serious sort of, you know, bourgeois, you know, think about Re-Animator, you know, it's this young couple, the inamorati, you know, are we going to get married? Oh, you know, my dad is the dean. And it's, you know, it's such a load of bourgeois cliche until Herbert shows up. And then it's, you know, then no holds barred, and, you know, we're off to the races. It's, you know, so that was Stuart but Stuart had been doing that in his theater for years and years, productions and productions, going way back to college. So it was always about the danger, and the danger, and the danger when you overcome it is funny. And when you don't, it's horror, it's horrific. And we were always walking that line. And it was
the original story.
I think it's why he called me, because we shared that sensibility. We were, that was, and he knew I understood it. And I also fit a lot of the other, categories: horror, theater, writing.
But Dennis, don't you agree that the original serialized short story of ReAnimator has got a lot of tongue-in-cheek humor? It is, it's just not fresh enough. It's, it's punctuated if you read it.
I've always had this question about Lovecraft. And here's where I pitch you guys. Hello. Okay.
Hello. Hey, that looks familiar, John.
And it's all here in the book. That I'm very proud to be named in. That I'm very proud to be.
Handsome
you guys
book.
You guys are very friendly to us.
We love you guys.
Except for Dagon, I think. But you guys are very friendly to us here, especially Castle Freak, of which I am very proud.
I like Castle Freak. A lot of people don't like that, but I like that movie.
No, I think it's our adult. That is our adult movie. That's not
very
funny.
Adult. Yeah.
That's not funny.
Yeah.
That's our not funny film. But the others, we always, for a long time I said, and I still say this because I'm still writing, that my job was to write something that producers would read and they would go, ha ha ha, that's great. You can't do that. Because you had to know where the line was.
Yeah.
You had to know how far you could go. And the only way to know how far you could go was to go past it.
Right.
So once you knew how far you could go, that's where you wanted to be as much of the time as possible. So that was our raison d'etre. That's what we always looked for. And Stuart was a master storyteller. A lot of my job was realizing Stuart's storytelling ideas. Stuart was brilliant with narrative.
Well, it's interesting you said you came in like, I think we were talking about Bleacher Bums, but you came in to kind of edit the thing too, to put it into like a workable frame. Because I know at least my experience with writing with Stuart, he's got a quicksilver brain. And you would sit down for a session and it would go into like 20 different paths, oh yeah, then we can do this and blah, blah, blah. And a lot of it was just trying to almost
corral.
The right word is corral or rein them in, or just stick to a path on it, because he's an idea machine,
Yeah, absolutely the case. What was, when I think of Stuart in those terms, it was like he would have an idea that I wouldn't like very much. And we would fight about it, and then Stuart would win, because that's how it always went. And so it was my job to realize this. So I would work on it. I would realize it, and damn if he wasn't right. If he had, I would go, oh, Stuart, that's too simple. Oh, Stuart, that's, that's too crazy. Oh, so whatever it was too something. But he was 99% of the time he was right.
Right.
And it was infuriating, but it was also realizing those ideas and making them work with the other ideas that we shared.
But here's another thing about it.
I get an idea of my own.
But another thing
pop in there. But that, it was, it wasn't that he had so many ideas. We would bounce ideas. So did I. We would bounce ideas off each other like crazy. But it was how right he was, even when I thought he was wrong.
And John, before we go on, I just want to go back to your point and ask Dennis again, because there does seem to be a more serious like trajectory from ReAnimator, From Beyond, Pit and the Pendulum, Castle Freak, then Dagon. It seemed like it was getting more serious in terms of and less humor. That seems like just from an outside looking at the trajectory of those films.
Yeah, I mean, to some degree, Stuart and I both sort of wanted to do everything.
Uh-huh.
I mean, we liked, as I said, we liked all kinds of movies. So we wanted to do, all kinds of movies. I don't think of, I don't think of Dagon as, it's serious because it's seriously Lovecraftian. It's, one of our more Lovecraftian Lovecraft movies.
Yeah.
It's serious in the sense that I think it's one of Stuart's best filmmaking efforts. I think he used dogma technique on that film. There's no non-diegetic sound. All the sound is generated by something in the film itself, I think, except for the, a little bit of music, at the beginning and the end.
Mm-hmm.
Every scene is wet. It gets wetter and colder as it goes along. So, the audience is getting, it should discomfit the audience from the filmmaking techniques themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's, and I think it has some of the most powerful images. Plus, it has a flashback in it. And Stuart was never a fan of flashbacks. Stuart didn't like voiceover narration, which the flashback has.
Mm-hmm.
Stuart didn't like those things. But he had to do it to make that film.
The story.
Because that's the way a lot of Lovecraft is shaped. It's somebody tells a story about something that happened, in some eldritch event that happened,
right.
Witch trial, time of witch trials or something.
Dennis, and that's because the belief of pulling someone out of the now and
Stuart was in your face theater. Stuart was people in the audience. Stuart was it was dangerous to be it was as dangerous to be in the audience as it was to be on stage.
Yeah. And he really convinced me of that, like over the years when we were talking about this topic and also my love of having things being historical. But his argument about it distancing and basically diluting the horror, you want to keep it as close to the audience's time frame and understanding. So it's
that's why we updated. That's why.
And it works. It really does.
The fact is, you're updating Lovecraft, but Lovecraft was. His stories were as current to their time as they could possibly be.
Right.
Even if they were about dimensions, multiple dimensions somewhere in non-Euclidean space, even if they were about witch trials in the 1600s or, the old ones, however old the old ones are, his work was very current. He was very current about science. He was very current about, his stories are so morally questionable, especially nowadays, because he was so current with the issues of immigration. Mm-hmm. There was immigration fear in that time, to some degree even worse than we have today.
The Irish, the Italians, and the Portuguese, to
say nothing of the blacks and the you know, the people from the jungle people, wherever they, you know, the island people, the, you know, Pacific Islanders.
Well, there's that sequence in Re-Animator, actually, where they resurrect the body of a black boxer.
Yeah, black boxer.
It's pretty horrific how he's described, I mean, by Lovecraft, you know.
Yeah. Oh, no, but, you know, that's the fear of that was a very American fear at that time. Mm-hmm. And it was, and it persisted to this day, but it certainly persisted through from the 20s when he started writing the Re-Animator stories. It persisted through World War II. I mean, we, you know, when the Jews were trying to leave Europe during the rise of fascism, they couldn't come here.
They returned.
More of them went to Canada and then came to America. Then there was a quota. It was the same with the Irish from the time of the potato famine. Mm-hmm. It was easier for them to get into Canada than it was, because you know, it was part of the British Empire, than it was to come to America. We, as you just suggested, we hated the Irish.
Well, we have a deep-seated history of racism. Yeah. I mean, Italians coming into New Orleans.
But that history was current events for Lovecraft.
Yep, sure.
And it's there in his work. So Lovecraft's work was always current. And when we bring it to the current times, what we're doing is essentially being Lovecraftian, I believe.
And making it more relevant to today's audience. Yeah. All right. Yeah, totally agree.
Well, see, but Dennis, that's what kind of strikes me when we go from Re-Animator, which is, you know, it's pretty faithful to that story, which wasn't one of his greatest stories, and he, you know, and you improved it, I think, by what you did with it. But From Beyond is literally 5 pages, and it's basically the prelude of that movie.
Yeah.
And then it goes into your movie, or your movie and Stuart's movie and all that kind of stuff. And the only thing that bugs me is having Lovecraft's name on it. Because if you watch that movie and it says H.P. Lovecraft's From Beyond, boy, that's nothing like Lovecraft, really. I mean,
well, the first
the obsession, the first 5 minutes, yeah, okay.
Is, you know, and that's a pretty faithful telling of that story.
That is very faithful. Yeah, it was very well done.
Now, you should know that what was cut from that film was the effort to recreate non-Euclidean geometry and spatial geometry when the resonator goes on. That was actually written into the story, and there were actually drawings for it, which is very Lovecraftian. We were trying to import that fundamental Lovecraftian idea into From Beyond. The Beyond was non-Euclidean space.
Right.
And that got cut.
Which you did in The Dreams in the Witch House. Now that makes sense to me. Your background in mathematics, which is well done in that little...
Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, as I said, Lovecraft knew the science of his day. I mean,
he was a scientist.
You're only able to create a non-Euclidean geometry if you know Euclidean.
if you know real Euclidean.
You know, and then, you know, I think he anticipated string theory, and you know, it was interesting to me how well it worked.
Yeah.
How well
I did like how you did those planes, you know, because he talks about the angles in the witch house doing something, and you make it into this really up-to-date scientific theory. Yeah.
Yes, you know, and it was stunning to me how easy that was to do.
Yeah.
You know, it was, you know, and academia, you know, frankly, and I've said this in a number of interviews, I looked at when I came on to Re-Animator, what I saw it as, you were talking about the humor, what I saw it as was a satire of academia.
Yes.
That's you know, it's like, you know, academia is crazy shit. You know, I mean, you know, it's about egos rampant. You know, Dr. Hill, ego's rampant. It's also about, you know, ideas being pursued ethically or otherwise.
Right.
It's at the expense of students. You know, There you go.
Thanks, John. We tied it in.
That's the image. Yeah. And, I mean, and so it was, it worked for me as well, I mean, so much, Miskatonic University is so central to so much of his work that, I felt that link as well.
Right, yeah. So
that was the first mention of Miskatonic in Herbert West Re-Animator.
Yeah.
When he first talks about it.
Yeah.
That makes total sense, especially with your background, the academia. Yeah.
Yeah, I taught at the largest urban university. I taught at a college in the largest urban university, I believe, in the world. And so you run into so many types. So it was so easy to incorporate those types and to also recognize those types in Lovecraft.
Yeah.
So
one of the good, like when they introduce, is it Dr. Hill, the grant machine?
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it's all about money.
Yeah. Oh no, that's what it's all about. Yeah.
And that's one of the funniest, actually, that's one of the funniest bits in ReAnimator where when West takes the shovel and when he's decapitating him, he says, "Plagiarist." I love that part.
And that is every graduate student's truth. Yes. That is every graduate student. That is the revenge of the graduate student.
Yeah.
That and the well-earned revenge of the graduate student.
So Dennis, I have a little story about that reminds me. I had a great physicist teacher at Texas A&M University. And he was great. He had a lot of humor to teach things, to teach you in the right order on how to do when you solve for things. And one of the stories was, I had grad students, right? And the grad students, this one grad student, he went and to defend his thesis, he failed. So he shot his advisor and then himself. And all I'm saying is, if you feel the same way about me, do it in the other order. And I never forgot how to solve that, particular problem because of his very, dry and dark sense of humor.
Well, that's that's just zombies solve that problem. Although that's something have we seen that, a zombie with a gun? I'm not sure we've seen a zombie with a gun.
A zombie with lots of brains.
No, I mean, I'm tired of the eating brains thing. I've done that, time to move on.
It's funny because Users was calling your guys in ReAnimator zombies. I never thought they were zombies, really.
No, they're just reanimated dead.
He kept calling them zombies, but
it's easy to see that, though.
Well, whatever. I don't know.
They
moved a lot faster.
There's an overlap there, but zombies are
zombies were originally slaves. I mean,
yes, zombies are pretty specific to the Caribbean culture.
Yeah,
and and I'll give I got to know Fabio Frizzi a little. We both got Lifetime Achievement Awards at a fantasy film festival in Brazil, in Porto Alegre, the Fantaspoa Festival, and the same year. So I got to know Fabio a little. And he's wonderful. He's the maestro. He's just a terrific guy. And one of the reasons I don't get to a lot of those places in Rome is I'm going to have dinner with Fabio.
Well, that's.
But I hadn't been that conversant with Lucio Fulci, and he was one of the first people on the zombie scene.
Yes.
And that's you don't do better than you don't do better than a zombie fighting a shark. You just don't do better. And there you are. That's funny, and that's horror, and it's like that's so great. How do you write music for that? And then you do this, and then you do that. Okay, that's why you're
before we get off ReAnimator, I just wanted to show you this because now we shall go to Paris, and it's your namesake. Are you familiar with Saint Denis?
Oh, Saint Denis, the saints. Yeah, he holds his head. Yeah,
there you go.
He holds his head. Yeah. Yeah,
I got it there because I was looking up when we were there. I was just looking up places to go, and the first Gothic church is Saint Denis.
Saint Denis, yeah.
And he's also on Notre Dame, but I got Stuart a little version of this because.
Yeah, sure.
No, but did you know that when you were doing that scene at all? I mean, were you familiar with this guy? It was just coincidence. The Saint. Nobody ever said, "Hey, you're doing this guy."
No, we were doing Dr. Hill. I mean,
okay.
the head appears in the last story,
sure.
I believe. The head,
that's faithful. That's a faithful adaptation.
It's we took a lot of images from all the different stories and used them.
Yeah.
And that's where that came from. Decapitation. I mean, there's a lot of it around. Yeah. You don't have to look far into history to find it.
No. It's more interesting to see if Lovecraft was influenced. Like, where did he get that idea from? Frankenstein.
Yeah, but I mean, it was, to make it work in our story, in our ReAnimator, which is taking bits from a number of the stories.
Right.
That just ended up working really, really well. I thought that's it. That movie tells its story very well.
Mm-hmm. And it's fun. You may have heard me say that we drove 3 hours from College Station to Dallas to see it at a midnight screening, and it was super fun to see.
The first time I saw it's the best audience I've ever been in. We saw they released it as part of a double feature for only 4 days to a theater on the outskirts of Philadelphia. So we had some friends in Philly at the time. So my wife Heidi and I went down to see it. We will go in, and it's the last showing on the Thursday night. It just ran Monday through Thursday as the second one of a double feature through the day. It was the last showing. It was, the 11 o'clock movie it was the 10 or 11 o'clock movie at this theater, on a Thursday night. We walk in. There's 9 other people in the audience, 9 other people. They're all black. They're, there's two guys are smoking, a guy and a woman are making out in the back. It's your standard, perfect. I was here for the other movie. I'll stay for this one and see what it is, and by the end of the first scene, they're with it.
Yeah.
And that was a crazy audience. They were so into the film, and it was like, and shouting at the screen, and wow, it was. I was so proud. I don't think I was ever prouder of being in an audience for that film than being in that audience.
I'll tell you, and
that's when I knew it was a good film.
You should be proud of is this one. I really dig this one, Pit and the Pendulum.
Yeah, well, that guy.
How did this one come about, Dennis? I mean, because
we always wanted. Stuart always wanted to do it. We always wanted to do a Poe. Stuart always wanted to do that one.
He did. Okay.
And Charlie Band wanted to do a big budget movie. So a big budget costume, and it was we hadn't really done a costume movie.
Yeah.
The flashback in Dagon is our costume movie.
Yeah.
That's so, and Stuart does a great job of it. He does a really good job.
We thought it looked like Godfather, in a sense, those flashbacks. Yeah. It's very impressive.
But Pit and the Pendulum was, and it was, Charlie Band promised us the world, as he did with every stupid movie we did. We're gonna get. We're going to get Billy D. Williams. We're going to get, we're talking to Peter O'Toole. It's going to be Torquemada. He wants to be Torquemada. And I'm going, yeah, okay. And again, there's the Poe story.
You got Oliver Reed.
The Poe story is only a little part. So we stole other Poe stories to make a story. But when we looked at it, it was okay. Let's look at the Inquisition.
Yeah.
The Poe story takes place in the 18th century, beginning of the 18th century, at the very end of the Inquisition.
Yes.
It's about the very, what's the tension in that story is he going to die before they shut down the Inquisition? That's essentially historically what it's about.
Yeah.
We took it back to the beginning of the Inquisition, 1492, which the Inquisition had been around for a little while before that, but it is given great power by the fact that Spain comes together as a nation state, as a powerful nation state. And they do several things at the same time in 1492. They send Columbus off to, they become an imperial power. They send Columbus off to the New World to, not just spread their idea of Christianity, but to take nation, Christianity gives them power as a nation. So it's actually politics. It's actually about politics. The other thing is that they expel the Muslims. So actually, Billy D. Williams was going to be this Muslim character. Hang on just a second.
Yeah.
So there was actually going to be a Moor in the film. There was, but that got cut. So essentially, the Moor's part of the story was in the pit. So the pit got cut. The pit and the pendulum is all about the pendulum. Yeah. But the pit got cut. There was a whole section on the pit where they get thrown into the pit. The pit is got, you're knee deep in bones of people who've been thrown, bones and body parts of people who've been thrown into the pit before. And there are still a couple of other live people in the pit who of course are cannibals at this point. So this was the cut entirely. Cut, and you have to make a ladder they have to kill them and then make a ladder of bones.
Bones. Oh, wow. That's
there, yeah.
So, it was a wonderful scene. I loved writing it. It was gone. Yeah. But in 1492, they also made it illegal to be a Jew.
Right.
You couldn't be Jewish. So, I believe in the film, there's, eat pork, prove you're not a Jew. At one of the auto da fes, where they're, the auto da fe is where it's a carnival. It's, Billy Wilder's The Big Carnival, Ace in the Hole, which they renamed The Big Carnival.
Well, the devils too.
It's, it's carne. Yeah. It is cannibalism. So, it all just worked together so well. And again, you have the young lovers who are just, unfortunately dragooned into this world of torture and insane ideas. But it's actually very political film.
Well, it's very accurate because I remember it almost is like fantasy, but it really happened where they would dig up corpses and excommunicate them and torture them.
Yeah.
And that was in a Buñuel film. That was in Milky Way or something like that.
Yeah.
And I loved
We were big Buñuel fans.
Whipping him.
We were big Buñuel fans.
Oh, he's my god. Yeah.
Yeah. This, what is it? This Strange Passion. I think it's just called
L. This Strange Passion.
It's a great.
That's an amazing movie that he made in Mexico. Yeah. Low budget film.
It goes back to the horror of, back when you were talking about the RCC before.
Yeah, right. Yeah, sure.
Buñuel's first job as he was an assistant director was The House of Usher.
Oh, yeah.
French, and a friend of mine wrote a new score to it. It's really good. It's a great movie. It's very surreal. That film.
Hey, Dennis, I had a question. I mean, we were talking about this, the pendulum being political. Well, I'm just going to bring it up just for closure. House of ReAnimator, or were you involved? Going to be involved with that with Stuart? Can you?
Yeah, I wrote about 4 different. I was just looking at Brian just asked about it. I was just looking at. It was Brian's idea. Stuart was mad to do it. He had just worked with Bill Macy on Edmund, which is one of my favorite Stuart movies, actually. He wanted Bill Macy to play George Bush. It was essentially, and it was, the House of ReAnimator was going to be the White House, and
right, yeah.
And it all made great sense, and it was, But, you know, again, I wrote about 4 different treatments for that. Stuart and I did together, wrote about 4 different treatments for that with, you know, that were, you know, almost totally different, you know, start to finish, except that Herbert West comes back and has to reanimate either the vice president or the president or all of them. You know, and that the, you know, that the country is essentially run by zombies, which we'd be better off.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I know it's, yeah. Especially,
yeah, I would rather have a president who ate brains.
That way you would have a brain.
At least have some brain.
Yeah. But, you know, but that was the idea that would, you know, and that's, you know, that the perfect fit of satire to concept was just too good. But again, you can't, you know, you can't raise the money. You know, there were issues. You know, I'm not sure Brian wanted it to be so specific to the characters. Stuart did want it to be specific to you know, the Bush administration, you know, but we wrote a couple of different versions that could have gone, you know, either way. But again, the money didn't get raised. So, you know, there was never a script, but there were 10, 12, 15 page treatments that were pretty detailed.
Yeah. So now you said you've retired from teaching, and that was Gothic literature, basically. You taught.
Yeah, I taught Gothic literature. My main job was I was an administrator. I ran a couple of writing programs. I ran a writing tutorial program with student tutors for student writers, and I wrote a faculty development program on how to teach writing in your courses. And it was much easier to work with students than it was to work with faculty. Faculty are ineducable. They are invested in the idea that they are expert and that they have nothing to learn. So they're not really good learners. I don't miss that part of the job at all, but I do miss working with, except, you know, when you meet a good colleague, it's wonderful. Sure. But I miss the students. But I taught Irish Lit and Gothic fiction as well.
But you said you're still writing. Can you talk about what you're working on these days, or?
No.
Okay. I get it.
Now, well, one, there's a couple of old things that have come around. I think the work I've done in this millennium that I'm proudest of is the one-man Poe show.
That was
theater, and Jeffrey's performance in Nevermore, An Evening with Edgar Allan Poe.
Yes.
And I'm really proud of that piece of work. It works great. Jeff is terrific. Stuart did such a subtle directing job. You know, people think of Stuart as this, you know, large effects and in your face. This was so subtle and brilliant.
I saw it 4 times out here. It was just I'm very, very proud of that work. Well, a performance from Halloween from almost 2014, exactly 6 years ago, was recorded by the producer, and they just made an audio book out of it. And it's available on Amazon and Audible and stuff. But, you know, I'm proud that that's back out there. Yeah. And we actually, you know, it's been a couple of months of giving feedback on the recording because it had to be re-engineered at certain points and balanced and, you know, stuff. You know, and it's very difficult since that is such a live performance and such a theater performance. Yeah.
It's very difficult to capture it just in a recording. So we had to, you know, make some suggestions as how best to do that. It can't be actually, but we made some suggestions, and it's a really good, but we wanted so for there to be a record Jeff's performance. You know, the play exists. It's a piece of paper. Anybody can pick it up and read it. But there needed to be a record of Jeff's performance, and at least this is one. I did a screenplay of that. That's out there.
Oh.
So we're you know, I'm going to look at that again and send it around.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Right now, I'm doing sort of pandemic projects, trying to clear the decks. I want to write short stories. I've never written short stories.
Oh.
You know, it's something I've never. You know, I want to do some things I've never done. I think we'll see pandemic horror of some kind. But there's always been pandemic horror.
Yeah, right.
Those zombie films are pandemic.
Did you ever read a book called Earth Abides? It's like one of these. It was the first kind of like apocalyptic in the 40s, and it won all these awards. And it's set in Berkeley, and it's like, but the cause of it is a flu, is a virus.
Yeah.
And most
I mean, the cause of The Stand is
the same thing.
A virus. Yeah.
It's unfortunately it's kind of an evergreen in horror.
Yeah.
Kind of feels like On the Beach to me in a weird way. You know.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's the it's any apocalyptic fear. Yeah. It's any, it's that kind of, the
breakdown of society.
I wasn't really, none of our movies are really about that. We're not really about, apocalypse and we're certainly not about, monsters coming from another planet, I mean,
well, Dagon. It's sort of
but Dagon. What Dagon is about, and this is clearly in Lovecraft. This is Lovecraft, a lot of Lovecraft. It's most of Lovecraft. As much as people think Lovecraft's about monsters, about Cthulhu and Shoggoths, and what Lovecraft's about is the fear that the monster is you.
Right, ancestry.
The fear that we are the monsters ourselves. True. And that's the politics that was fundamental to Stuart picking these stories in the first place. It's about, we're the dangerous people. We're more dangerous than any monster out there.
Well, like Stuart said, both his parents went mad, or they used to call it madness, and that was always the fear Lovecraft had of himself. Is he going to wind up, both his parents died in asylums,
Right,
yeah.
Right.
Yep, exactly.
It's the, that was the story we wanted to tell about how, you think you know who you are, but you don't know who you are until you really investigate who you are, until you're really tested. And then will your moral compass hold up? Will you be a human being? Mm-hmm. And what's lovely about ReAnimator is that the choice Dan has at the very end. What does it mean to be a human being? He reanimates Meg. He makes a zombie out of it's as an act of love, and that's as twisted as we get. It's pretty twisted. The end of Castle Freak is pretty twisted when you discover that their brother, that these brothers are, fighting on the roof. The one a monster and one a guilt-ridden human. Fighting on the roof. That what image is better about us, about who we are?
Right.
I mean, I will always give Stuart credit for picking those stories. For that being the and the horror in Pit and the Pendulum is the Inquisition. It's what we allow institutions to do to us.
Well, it both has Jonathan Fuller in here too.
Yeah,
who was great and also Lance Erickson. This guy is so incredible as Torquemada.
Great.
It's just,
he is. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, great job.
Just amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and Jeffrey's in that movie.
And Jeffrey's very good in it too. Yeah.
Tom Coles used to be in Stewart's in the Organic Theater. Stuart did a lot of full circle. It was very important to him to work with some people. It was very important to him to. He was so faithful. Mm-hmm. He was so faithful as a director, and he was faithful as a friend. and I miss him
Yeah.
terribly. I still see things on the street. This still happens with my father, and my father died in 2000. I see things on the street, and I go, and it just comes into your head, you know, oh, I need to tell Dad about that. That's what it happens with Stuart once a week. You know, oh, I got to call Stuart, you know, and, you know,
well, that's why people never really gone, because as long as they're kind of with you. You incorporated, you absorbed part of who they are.
Yeah, it's very strange to me to think of a world that Stuart Gordon isn't in.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
You know, I mean, it is very, very strange to me. It's disconcerting, and I have work to do, and I'm ready to go, and I love my wife, and I love all my friends, tons of friends, and I love them all. And you know, and I'm proud to do things like this, to see you guys and talk.
No, thank you very much.
But I you know, the other thing horror is about is that makes it profoundly human is loss.
Yeah.
You know, and when I taught Gothic fiction, even the worst Gothic fiction, including the first one, The Castle of Otranto, is about loss. It's a classic romance, medieval romance, but it's with an unhappy ending, with a dissatisfactory marriage and the loss and profoundly affected by the loss of loved ones, and that's what horror is about. It's about losing your loved ones.
And Lovecraft like that. Lovecraft is very much like that. This
very much like that, including the love. You know, your love for you love who you think you are until you discover who the hell you are. You know, until you discover that you're one of those shambling frog people, or that your mother or your grandmother made it with an ape. And that's is that who I am? Is that real?
And Dennis, I noticed you don't have any mirrors anywhere, so that's good, right?
I'm looking at myself on this damn Zoom. How much time on Zoom? Who needs a mirror? I got the Zoom.
That's true. So the next, you should combine all your efforts over the years, and you could do something like From Beyond the Bleachers, ReAnimator Bums.
Yeah, right. That we could reanimate. A number of those guys. It's sad how many of those actors are gone now too. And we could once you reanimate, you can go back and do anything you did.
Hey, I just have one quick question on this, because obviously it says The Pit and the Pendulum. When you watched a movie, it's called The Inquisitor. They never changed it. Was that the original title you guys had, or was it always called Pit?
This is all on Charlie.
Yeah. Okay.
If you want to ask this, Castle Freak is called Castle Freak because Charlie had art.
Yeah.
Had a poster that said Castle Freak.
And he had a castle.
And he had a castle.
He lived in.
So, it was.
We'll be talking to Richard Band.
But it's also how movies get made in Hollywood. I mean, as I said before, they renamed Ace in the Hole, one of my favorite Billy Wilder films. Yeah. They renamed Ace in the Hole The Big Carnival because, they thought it would sell better. They thought it would be easier to market. Yeah. It's an insane business. The film business is an insane business. Good to see you again.
And take care, please. Let's get through this.
Yeah, right. So, we'll, someday when we can travel, you're all
far.
Here. We'll meet in Chicago for pizza.
That sounds great.
Uno.
Uno. See you, kids.
Okay, see you.
Take care.
All right. Well, Andrew, are you gone?